Welcome to the North Side. All right. And you're welcome back time and time again. I am D.A. Bullock. I'm a local filmmaker, like truly local. I live within walking distance of here. I'm an adopted North Sider, but originally from Chicago. I'm a filmmaker. Somebody called me a story-based organizer. I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm stealing that. So I stole that. So I use that from time to time. And my purpose here is to give way to all of this brilliance we have on this panel and spark some questions and definitely get into some back and forth conversation, because I know everybody up here they don't love lecturing, they love back and forth and community give and take. So I will let everyone on the panel introduce themselves, and we'll start.
With me. Hello, room of people. My name is Susan Raffo. I go by either Susan or Raffo, and I tell you that because there's people in this room who know me as one name and as the other, and they're both real. She, her pronouns. My heart is pounding because I'm very aware there's people in this room I've learned so much from, including definitely the front of this room. And because Owen asked, I definitely said yes. But it's also deeply humbling to be invited to reflect on something we've all been through, where there's so much wisdom in this room. So, the sort of quick and dirty for the DA and I were talking about like how funny it is to introduce yourself, because I always end up this place where it doesn't matter what I'm going to tell you, I much more trust what you experience, and all these kinds of words, etc. They don't really tell you a lot, but your instinct tells you more. I'm a writer. I'm an organizer, and for the purposes of this work, there's two things I'll say for the purposes of our conversation today. One is about 20 years ago, I started sitting with that question of how are the histories that we carry in our body impacting our capacity to transform the world we're a part of. And so I don't have an answer to that, but I've been in deep practice with that for 20 years. And then the other piece is that I am honored to be a part of a project called Relationships Evolving Possibilities, REP. We emerged in 2020 during the uprising right after George Floyd was murdered. We are Black-led and Black-centered, and we are a multiracial leadership team, which means we are continually in conversation about the clarity of a multiracial leadership team that is Black-led and Black-centered. And our work is to listen to and be in practice about exactly what we've been living through. How are we safer when we can turn to our neighbors for care and safety rather than an impersonal state? And so we are in practice with that in a lot of different ways. We've learned a lot. We've also learned just how hard it is to be in practice with that when times are not in high crisis and high intensity. And for now, that's what I'll say, and happily hand off.
Good afternoon.
I have food in my mouth.
It's okay. My name is Sandra Richardson. I am a daughter, and I am a sister, and I am a sister friend, and I am, I gotta go back. I'm an excellent daughter. Excellent daughter, okay? I am the best auntie on the planet because I had the best auntie on the planet.
Beautiful.
I am an anti-racist community organizer. I started organizing around housing when people were homeless and dying outside. I did not know there was going to be a whole industry that came up around that because I was young and I didn't understand how things worked. But I came into contact with an organization called the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, and I'm still involved with them. And it changed my life, and I'm the trainer and the Twin Cities coordinator for People's Institute North. The other role that I'm really happy in right now is working with an organization called Brown Body, which is a African American cultural organization, and they combine dance and original music, movement, African diasporic movement, and they do that on ice with African American elite ice skaters. Wow. And I am their Undoing Racism, Healing, and Organizational Consultant. And it's a place where I get to bring kind of all of my skill sets, the spirit ones. Yeah, and so I'll say more about life, but
That's lovely.
I'll turn it to you.
All right.
Okay?
I'm Ricardo Levins Morales. And actually, before I answer the question, I just want to make a comment. One of the things that I always am attuned to in life and in movements is what I call the emotional chemistry of the moment. And one of the measures of that in gatherings is the quality of the background chatter, which you listen to as a musical experience, not to discern what people are saying. And so I was listening to the background chatter in this group before we got started, and I have to say that that was not the soundtrack of a people who have been defeated, or the people who have been broken. So, yeah.
Clock it.
And especially in the period that we're entering into, after the most intense part of the collective experience, it's important to monitor how that emotional rhythm develops. So I am from Puerto Rico, a land without either skis or ice skates, and landed in Chicago as a youngster, where my first political home of my own was the Chicago Black Panther Defense Committee, and was also connected to the Young Lords, so as someone outside their neighborhood, the Puerto Rican group. And I'm saying this because I was exposed to the way that organizing really played out, not the romanticism, right? I'm not mentioning that for street cred, but for realism, right? And one of the things I learned from the way that organizing happened is that when you're dealing with profound divisions in society, it's not about meeting halfway, it's about making a better offer. Right? You don't come up with a narrative, a compromise that's half racist and half anti-racist, half fascist and half anti-fascist. Although, despite what some liberal consultants might recommend. Yeah, also, I am also an artist, by the way. Yeah, after Chicago, I was in Boston, where as a janitor in a hospital, I got involved in my first union drive, and that brought me into the labor movement. And I've kind of unwittingly been sort of like a little pollinator flitting in through, factories and hospitals and different movements, rural and urban, which has kind of allowed me to collect nutrients from all these places. And so I'm really fascinated by what they have in common. What do you hear when you put your ear to the ground? And what rhythms do you notice? If there are people into music, you know that any song you sing, even if it's some new and innovative genre, it's still based on a legacy of past ones. And it still contains within it the legacies of invasions and migrations and mergers and all the different ways in which traditions influence each other. And that's the way I listen to movements, because every moment is a combination of profoundly made out of the past with new twists that are from the present that we carry into the future. So that's what I got.
Nicely done. All right, that's it. We're done. Yes. No, that's beautiful. It is actually a setup for the first question is like what Ricardo just described is like taking all of the history, all of the moments, and particularly there's something, magnetism that has happened here in the Twin Cities around world-changing events. So I'm curious for folks on the panel, and we could do this popcorn style, whoever wants to start. Like, what were you noticing that was inspiring, challenging, powerful during this moment, this occupation moment, but really is resonating throughout all of those moments that we've lived through and we've experienced?
Now that's a question.
take a deep breath.
I mean, and it's real because there is a reason why this keeps happening to us in this room, right? There is something about us that is special, something about us that is resilient, something about us that is magnetized, resonant, etc. And sometimes it's hard for us to view ourselves from very close. That's why I love you all's wisdom, because you've seen many iterations of this. So it could even be down to something like a moment or a individual connection that happened recently during this occupation.
I think I'll just start with, I have a cousin, and her husband always calls folk from Minnesota basic. Okay. Basic. And so when Metro Surge jumped off and people responded, I called him and I said, yeah, we basic. We know right from wrong. Okay. And so I think one of the things that resonated for me is my parents were very active in the civil rights movement. And so as a child, I learned that, when something's wrong, people take to the streets, you go with them. I learned that, you go to meetings, you stuff envelopes, you organize, and you don't wait for somebody to tell you to do it. You don't wait to be invited. And I think one of the things that was powerful about this moment was the number of people who didn't wait to be told what to do.
Huge.
Yes.
And I think that in similar ways, if you look back at movements, okay, it's the people, the ordinary everyday people, who just decide, enough is enough, or I'm going to do this, and they believe that they can make something change. And so I saw that in my parents and my elders who are now passing, but that belief that they could make something change. And a lot of them were like my parents. They came out of the segregated South, wanted to raise their children in a better place. They came to Minnesota, who knows why, but they did, because there was a whole other thing going on up here that they were not aware of. But I think that the same thing that's really inspiring or motivating in this moment is how to sustain it, and how to keep people awake now. I mean, one of the things that's always I thought funny is that people say, oh, you woke. Like it's some kind, like a slur. And it's kind of like, who the fuck wants to be asleep all the time? Okay? And so, but it's challenging to stay awake in a system that wants you not to be awake. But good stuff.
Ricardo, do you want to go, or do you want me to?
No, I want you to go.
I love this question because I feel like on the most small level, over the whatever, et cetera, and then like national articles, people have been, we're sitting in this question, and I love that I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Like I love that it doesn't feel like for everything I read that says here's a reflection of why, I'm like, and here's what that doesn't include, and this and this. And so the reason I like that is that it, the body worker parts of me feel safer, because it's like I really do believe that the deepest change emerges, and that we strategize for all kinds of change, but we're not in control of when it is time. And that actually makes me strangely feel safe. So I want to say, it's like I'm aware, I've lived in the cities, I've lived in Minnesota Makoche since 1989. I'm from the east side of Cleveland, Ohio, which just gets such a bum rap. And it
Give Cleveland
matters.
some love. Yes.
And it matters that I moved to a land where I met people within the first years of living here who were the grandparents of people who were part of the Dakota War, who grew up with those stories, both Dakota and white folks. It matters the way that the shape of anti-Black racism here and the way in which the sort of liberalism that in relationship to sort of a kind of Northern European liberalism, the way those two interacted when I first moved here was very different from what sort of how anti-Black racism shows up in Cleveland. So there was a lot of learning, and then again, it's a very recent history, a recent history of this geography that we're on being more than so homogeneously white native with small communities of color and small immigrant communities. It's very recent that we've become the city that we are, right? So I feel like there's a lot that is just different here within that. And that still doesn't answer the question to me. Like the fact that there have always been Native folks who live here who are native to this land and who we are in, those of you in this room who might be Native, First Nations, we are in relationship with you, we are learning from you. Like that matters. That is not true across the US part of Turtle Island. And I go through all of the big picture stuff, and then it was somebody who said something to me somewhere in January or whatever, and they were like, oh, I know what the reason is that when it snows real hard, you just push out whoever's car is stuck. And they were like, that's what this is we just have the habit of, and the experience of sometimes helping somebody no matter who they are, because getting them out of snow, and I don't assume that doesn't mean that violence and aggression doesn't happen during snow times. Let me just say that really clearly. And I do hear that there's a lot of times where helping also happens, the habit of it. And I think that matters. And then, when you asked about a time, I'll talk about a time in this where I'm still moved by it. Like, it brings me to tears thinking about it. But I want to say that what has often been the hardest for me is to watch either us locally or folks from outside super exceptionalize us. The number of times I'm hearing people do this whole we have to follow Minnesota, and I want to say yes, and now stop. Please don't turn us into something like yet another object that people either put up on a pedestal or trash on the ground. Don't do that to us, particularly when we've been flyover for so goddamn long, It's like there are things here that we're still trying to understand ourselves, and there is no singular we to begin with anyhow. That we didn't all experience it the same way, we're not experiencing the same way now. Some of us have never been safe, and these couple of months were just another shape of unsubject. Others had choice about whether they engaged. So those are all just still true. Exactly. And so we're, I think it matters so much that we're trying to sort this out and that we don't get lost in the hype about what's happened here. And there was this moment, I don't know how many of you went to it, but there was a grief ritual in Powderhorn Park in February that was created in relationship with Becca Good and with Renee's family. And this was planned before Alex was murdered, and it was planned with the awareness that many other people have been murdered who are not Renee and Alex. And it was co-created by folks from Indian Collective, other Dakota Ojibwe spiritual leaders from here, and then community members who are not Native, mostly who were settlers. And there was this period when we were pulling it together, and in the gift of being invited into traditional ceremony in a public way, so much of it was a gift. But as we were pulling it together, the first half of the ceremony was Dakota Lakota held, and the second half was community held, which means multiracial but not specifically Native. And people were talking about the ending of this ceremony, and there was a kind of movement energy in it, like, we're gonna end with we can do it, we can defeat ICE, right? Very movementy, very let's get ourselves up and energized and know we can just do it. And so that's what the conversation was happening, we can do it. And one of the elders, Gabby Strong, she sort of paused us, for those who know Gabby, powerful, who's paused us and just said, why are you ending this differently than the way that it is? Why are you ending this differently than the way that we started? It's like we end the way we begin, which is the way we are surviving right now, which is the reason we are here, is to take care of each other. And if there is something in the way of our capacity to care for each other, whether it is historical, systemic, or present moment, then we need to contend with that, because the only reason we are here is to care for each other and the land that makes our lives possible. And, you know, for all of us in this space who are not Native, who are settlers, you know, it just sort of shifted the tone and took that energy, that kind of, which sometimes is such a necessary energy to have, but it rooted it in something other than just this. We're going to do it. In a way that sometimes, unfortunately, that has meant that we've actually left behind the people who are right next to us. And that was the gift of it. And for me, you know, the last piece I'll say that is actually a grief that I feel is that as a white woman in multiracial movements, there's always been the question, in particular, how do white folks, particularly middle-class folks of Christian lineage, people who don't have to get involved, right? Because the systems are designed to protect us. When the hell do my people get involved in a large way? Right? And so that happened in a way here, in a specific way, which I feel grief about, like yay, and also caution, you know, like there's more to it. Like when you say, how does this continue forward? That's for me, looking at my own people in this moment, that's some of the question that I have, you know, and I hold that with the place of having a lot of time talking to folks about being really careful about the, you know, we didn't rise up this way in 2020. In these amounts, you know, we definitely did not. And so I feel some of my work with my people is who are we determining who are the victims who get our, you know, or who are the ones who are innocent in this moment who get, et cetera, and who is not. I feel like there's still so much work to do. Yeah. And this just sort of showed it in a way that I feel also really proud of. That's what comes to mind.
I want to sit out there and listen.
Oh my goodness, okay.
We can switch places.
Okay.
So I have 50 years under my belt of being engaged in movement work, right? And one thing that felt different to me this time is that I've never before been in a situation that felt I was part of an occupied community in resistance, an occupied population in resistance, and that has to do with critical mass.
Yes.
And that's not inevitable. And it wasn't inevitable here. It could have tipped another way. There's a variety of factors that fed into this being the way it turned out. And clearly, the fascists in Washington thought it would turn out a different way. That when you cracked the flint, it would break off in a different percentages, right? And part of the reason it broke that way is because of 2020 and because of the movements before that. And people who sat on the fence in 2020 but were very disturbed came into the streets this time. Yes. There are people who are sitting on the fence now who will come in the next time.
Beautiful.
There are people who are now going to retreat back into the comfortable mythology so that we're the shining city on the hill. But it won't sit very well because that fence is very rotten at the base and it's not a stable place to return to. So we will see them again. And I'm saying this as part of the inevitability. Every wave of struggle, when the wave recedes, leaves something on the beach and some things get swept away. And one of the things I like people to think about, especially those newer to struggle, but something for all of us to deal with, is to ask yourself, what is my policy on disappointment?
Oh, nice.
Because for these big waves of movements, for many people, they are transformative in ways they couldn't imagine because it's the first time they felt an experience of collective love on that scale, or this idea that we have all this power. And the thing that always you hear on people's lips is, this changes everything. Well, it doesn't. And that realization can feel devastating, right? So is disappointment a motivator or a paralytic, right? And that's a choice that we make. Because if we understand, if we inoculate ourselves against the fact that, oh, this is the way these cycles go, then we can ride those waves. It still sucks, but we can ride them, right? We're not pulled under by them. Another thing that struck me,
That's beautiful.
especially, I would get calls, like a lot of people have, from media organizations in other places, right? For whatever reason, on somebody's radar, and somebody from the New York Times or here or there will call and say, you know, we want to ask you some questions, and can you point us to the people who, you know, some of the people in leadership who have done this or that? And I'm like, who? I never know. I don't know who to refer people to, because there has been no central leadership node. There's been real leadership coming from a variety of locations, but there's something very encouraging about the fact that you can't just say, okay, no, this is the number you call to talk to the folks in charge.
I love it.
Absolutely.
And there's another thing I want to pause on, and that's one of the things that we look at, like assessing any moment is about looking back and looking forward. And looking back to see what is our legacy, what have we inherited that's here, and that includes what's valuable and what is harmful or weak. And given the pattern of those things that have appeared in the present, what do we need to compensate for going forward? And what do we need to nurture and hold on to? And part of that is seizing and holding on to and defining for ourselves the narrative of what just happened. Because that gets taken away from us. You know, after the beating of Rodney King, the fact that that uprising was a black-led, multiracial event got erased into being, oh, it was a black riot. Right?
Always a riot.
Right now, the way in which racism and patriarchy land on a community and on a people defines how we are visible to each other.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So, for example, a lot of the people chasing ICE and chasing and showing up in the homes of Ecuadorian and other families with food have been white folks. A lot of people, but the fact, and a lot of these immigrants are saying, we never imagined that all these people would actually have our back. Even when some of them got shot, they still had our back. But what's not as visible are black-led protests, indigenous safety patrols, and ceremonial events, and challenges to the Whipple. You had people from immigrant communities who have always felt themselves exceptional, talking about how this, for the first time, we realized we're actually in it with you. And so that's one of the narratives that I think that I'm paying attention to now, especially within the Latina community, is how do we make visible the reality of the moment in a way that undermines anti-Black racism in the immigrant communities, right? And that's about storytelling and visibility. Okay, DA, take it.
No, thank you. You all have given me a lot to think about in terms of these questions, because we are asking sort of granular questions about, well, tell us what we should know, like going out of the room. But I do like the idea that Susan brought up about like being enough in the moment to understand what emerges from the moment and not trying to formalize things and just understanding that alchemy exists, like that's the magic of it exists, and how do we really take that forward in a way that is beyond the neighboring sensibility and more into the policy sensibility, because that's where I land a lot. I do filmmaking, I do documentary filmmaking, and what I'm always trying to understand is how does the story of something that happened in a community really inform our public policy? And I think that's part of what we have trouble with here in the Twin Cities. We are very much about our hero story, and we love showing up together and loving on one another. But then when it's time to do that vote about extending eviction notices, you know, people are like, well, what does that have to do with me? Like, so there's some disconnect there.
Sure. Absolutely.
That I'm fascinated by. I would love to hear, how do you all think about that in this moment and just generally? And that speaks to a lot of what Ricardo was talking about, the disappointment part of it. That hit me in my heart, thinking about like, how do I respond to disappointment too?
Do you want to, you had said you were holding it back earlier, Sandra, did you want to talk?
I think the reality is that we're not that much different than we were 4 months ago. We're not. And I think that if we are not honest about that,
Yep.
if we're not honest about the anti-Blackness, if we're not honest about the racism, if we're not honest about the different levels of humanity that are granted to you based on a variety of things, but right now very heavily based on race, always based on race, we will fail, as we always have. I mean, I think the thing that I see what happened with George Floyd and where I located myself, and what happened with Metro Surge and where I located myself, very different places. And I saw George Floyd, okay, his humanity was never centered.
No.
Okay, it was social justice, but his humanity was never centered. Okay, and so, but I see with Metro Surge, okay, people's humanity, I'm not going to say it was centered, but it moved toward the center. Okay, and that located me in a really different place. And I don't think that we can be successful unless we're able to have those hard and painful conversations about those kind of realities. Because racism hasn't changed, internalized inferiority and superiority hasn't changed, people are still scared, that hasn't changed, white people still want comfort, that hasn't changed, okay? And the only difference that I really see is that white people in Minneapolis now know you can be a citizen with a job and be a parent and have a home, and you can be shot down in the street like a dog, okay? And I have seen this, for white people, this is personal.
Yes.
In a way that my interactions with people around white people around George Floyd never were. And I just think that if we are going to make something of, there's always moments, okay? But do we have the courage to face the moment? Okay, what Ricardo was saying a few minutes ago about, okay, this is organizing is not glamorous.
Say that again.
Okay. Okay, and as Ronchism would say, you're not gonna get no grand theft money. Okay, it's not, but it is necessary.
Yes.
It is necessary, and I think that just like people came out of their houses and, there were people who made food and took food. There are people who knew that if you're buying diapers, you got to buy wipes too. There, people stood and moved forward, okay? But now it's time for something harder. Yeah. And so are we willing to do the harder? Are we willing to sit in where we are disconnected? And how much energy are you willing to put into somebody who doesn't look like you?
Yeah. And if I could add something, Sandra, you sparked something in my mind. There are still people who have been active in this resistance who make a distinction between a local armed violent force invading communities and a national armed violent force.
Yep, say it out loud.
It's the same force.
It is.
Yes.
It's the same invasion.
It is.
Same
It's a continuation of the
Same
same.
thing.
Abolition now. Right.
People that make distinction, I would encourage them to read the MPD 150 report and then make a distinction between ICE and MPD. There's really no distinction, but we have these sort of limitations in our brain. Sorry, I didn't mean to interject.
No.
Yeah.
That's fine, because what I was going to say is that in addition to those hard conversations that we need, there's another one about, okay, so what's the difference between what happened to George Floyd and MetroServe, and how is it part of the same whole? Because it is part of the same whole. But we a lot of times want to be overly simplistic about how. Racism is complicated and simple at the same time, but it has many layers and it does many things to keep the current racial hierarchy in place. And so, are we going to do the work? Because they're not doing what we're going to do in 6 months. They're not doing what are we going to do in a year. They're doing 15, 20 years, okay, out. You've read Project 2025?
Absolutely.
Okay, they're on it.
Yeah, and they're meeting still.
Yeah, and I don't want to take it away from that, but just that it's the same power.
Absolutely.
You know, and we're just in different locations, but we tend to compartmentalize it, okay, and not do the work to wrestle with that whole. I'm sorry, a little inarticulate there at the end. Sorry about that, but
No, well said.
Yeah.
So much so.
Got you.
So much so.
Yeah, one of the things, so this resistance to the occupation brought in, I think, two streams of people. Those who were responding to what was happening as an extension of the empire, of what we've always gone through from the origins of fascism, which were in slavery in the United States, all the way through to as a clear through line. And there were those for whom this is such a shock because it violates everything this country has ever stood for. The shining city on the hill, a beacon of democracy, a champion of human rights. But this is real. This is the indoctrination that is so deeply held, right? And that's another difference between 2020 and 2025 and 6 is that the people spearheading the uprising after George Floyd were people who were responding to the fact that this is the shit that always happens.
right,
And
Right.
so many of the people responding to this moment is that, oh my God, this is so unacceptable and extraordinary. This is what we refer to as a teachable moment, right? You know, the proper response is welcome. We've been waiting for you. And here's a few things you need to know.
right, yes.
I was back in Puerto Rico a few weeks ago and having a conversation with my friend Maria Reinat, who you might know from.
Maria, yes.
And she pointed out that for decades we've been telling white folks to stand up, don't wait, just do something. And now they did it. And so we need to notice that, right? And the next steps to take. And also solidarity is always inadequate and always necessary. The people in Europe who smuggled Jews to safety and kept them safe, many of them carried anti-Semitic, attitudes. There were white people supporting the Underground Railroad who harbored racist ideas. Frederick Douglass talked about that. That when we're talking about moments of solidarity, moments of mass movement, no matter what the impressions we get from looking back at history, they're always messy, always inadequate, and never quite what they hoped it would be. And so that's simply what we would call the material we have to work with, right? And then how do we move that forward? And again, the fact that the empire is in decline, and that's why you have fascism emerging, is when the mythologies of the empire are no longer sufficient to support the machinery and keep everyone on board, the co-optive power of the liberal establishment just isn't there the way it used to be. You know, the people who voted for Kamala Harris in the last election, there was none of that illusion that happened when they voted for Barack Obama.
True.
It was like, oh, fuck, this is shit. If you put that on PBS,
That's the title of the next part of the
but
series.
it was, it was seen as a defensive choice
Yeah.
and a strategic choice.
Yes.
And that's really good. The problem is, when you don't have good options on the menu, people always go for the best option there is, right?
Yeah.
So our task is always to create a credible alternative option to put on the menu, whatever the momentary defensive choices we have to make. And also, another thing that I've had to push back about these national media people who come in, and international, actually, one was from Sweden, they, and this sort of riffs off but expands what you were talking about. They want to frame the movement in Minnesota as something that burst on the scene because 2 white people were killed. And I have to ask them, why were those 2 white people in the street? That already, I was talking to friends and family in other parts of the country and saying, this is something that is different from the way I've seen movements emerge before. This was not a response to these white people being killed, rather it was the other way around. Now, one thing that changed,
They responded.
yeah,
Right.
one thing that did
They
change
pushed.
was that it was followed by these mass public demonstrations. So something did change, but that wasn't and that brought in people who hadn't been part of these networks. But that is what was going on.
Yeah. If you resist, doesn't matter who you are.
Exactly.
If you threaten.
Yep.
But was it Audre Lorde who said, sometimes, no, it was Bernice,
Johnson Reagan.
yes, Reagan, who said, when you stand up and you fight the empire, you do all this stuff, sometimes you don't get killed. Right? Of all the people who are involved in these movements, yes, we think about the martyrs, but actually that doesn't happen to most of us.
No,
Right.
yes.
We got to deal with the fear, we got to deal with the dangers. It could have been any of us, but
They can't kill us all.
that's right.
They can't kill us all.
I feel so aware right now, and I feel positioned as a care worker, because the whole time folks are talking, I keep seeing this image of a river, right? And the way the top of the river will sometimes move very, very quickly, but the closer you get to the ground, the slower the water moves, and sometimes the water barely moves at all. And in the midst of Metro Surge, I kept remembering how in the 19th century, white abolitionists who took responsibility and credit for the legal ending of enslavement, not the full ending of enslavement, but the legal ending of it, then left and said, we were so successful, we did this amazing thing, what are we going to do now? And sort of basically were like, wow, Native people are really struggling, we should go fix that too. And what emerged was boarding schools. What emerged was forced assimilation. And so I just keep thinking, most of my early work was specifically movement as in campaign work, as around doing a lot of work around the relationship between anti-imperialism and anti-racism, how colonization and racism are the same globally and US-wise. And at one point, I was like, this is still so necessary, but I keep feeling like I'm in conversations about what we do and not as often about what we are when the two are there at the same time, right? And I certainly know, again, for my people in movement, we can get so caught up in what we're doing, which half of the time is really just esteem. We just want to feel better, so we get involved so that we feel better, not actually so we're changing systems. And then sometimes because it's coming from a really deep place, all of it is there, but it's still so often about doing. And so there we are in Operation Metro Surge, and I'm looking at who is ICE. I'm looking at what has shifted and changed. I'm like, this is absolutely the same conversation it has been for 500 plus years. And it's a reframe and a shape in something different we're in the middle of. Again, not different with a capital D, but sort of how Christian nationalism and how Project 2020-25 is telling its story and who it's inviting in. I can't even put meaning on it yet, but I know it's still different. And so while I was in the ground, I was looking for what are the things that feel like, not that they are the guarantee that the 500 plus years are now different. Our descendants will tell us if it's different, right? But I was looking for what are the moments that feel different in my own lifetime, that are the ones that I'm trusting. And I'm gonna slow down and think about how to say this, because I am both a very trusting person. It's like if I meet somebody, I'm like, hi, I can feel you're a good person. There's that trust. But in terms of things lasting beyond this moment, I feel a lot of caution, right? But I remember not far from here, when Jamar Clark was murdered. May he be held, right? And at the occupation of the 4th Precinct. And I remember there were a group of us who dragged an ice house in front of the police station, you know, and we were giving body work to Jamar Clark's family and to kin and to people who were frontlining. And at that point, I remember a lot of the conversation we were having was about like almost still building a case for why care as a part of movement matters. And I remember having this conversation with somebody from the 4th Precinct, and I said, you know, in my brain, I don't actually use the word oppression that much anymore. More and more I use the concept that I think about as relationship betrayal. Because it feels so intimate in a way that sometimes the word oppression can let me go into my brain and almost sort of stand up here and look down, as opposed to the intimacy of, in this room, our people have shat upon our people for fucking generations, right? The fact that we trust each other at all sometimes is extraordinary. You know, and I'm talking race, gender, a range of things in here, obviously. And so I was talking, you know, in the 4th Precinct, that was sort of the conversation, like that kept rising for me, that I'm so grateful for the conversations I had, as much as I wish it had not needed to happen at the time in which they did, was what does it mean to turn to each other from recognizing that there is relationship betrayal here, and that trusting is hard, and is not a guarantee. And so I look at that across multiple things, you know, and I know that this moment of Operation Metro Surge was also heavily impacted by so many frontline organizers who were really involved with Line 3. You know, and we're really learning and being shaped by that learning there, in addition to the uprising in 2020, in addition to after Philando Castile was murdered, in addition to Standing Rock. There's been so many spaces and moments here. And you know, and I love, you know, Ricardo, there's sometimes when you talk, my heart just goes, oh, because, you know, when you say this is a moment, exactly, of like collective, this sort of moving forward. And I hear that, and then I also hear what you just said, Sandra, about, and in some ways this is no different than 4 months ago. And I feel like both of those things at the exact same time, and I know we all do. You know, holding the contradiction without confusion. And when it comes to large scale stuff, it's hard for me to trust that, except when it's emerging. But not to trust or assume it's going to happen again, but like what creates the conditions for it to emerge. And I know for me, there is something about the intimacy of this relationship betrayal, who we are in addition to who we do. And for me, that means, you know, working with a lot of white folks in various ways, although not just only, but also the humility of like, we are not smarter than our ancestors. We are not wiser than our ancestors. This is more complex than a single answer. And I get in the way of the transformation I want to make happen all the fucking time because of my ego and my fear and my control and all the rest of it, and so do all of us. Yes. And so without, you know, and I said this is the place where it can be dangerous because the binary will make it be, oh, therefore doing this work is all that matters. Fuck system change. Bullshit. You know, it's always both and, but it's where it brings for me like, what made me trust so much about this moment, and not therefore the period is at the end of the sentence, but that there were practices of care and respect within the context of relationship betrayal that feel to me to be, it's almost like a softening or a door, not a guarantee. But a softening, please.
I'm struggling with this.
Please.
Please. I'm struggling with the relationship betrayal.
Tell me.
And oppression, because to me, oppression is that collective, institutionalized relationship betrayal. And so a lot of times, I get the feeling that what will happen is what happens a lot of times now, that white people will think, well, I'm nice to Sandra, okay? You know, I like her, and that can be a beautiful thing, but it doesn't change the system at all under which we're living. And I'm not giving out passes to special white people.
Absolutely.
Okay, that say that you're outside of this when you're not.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so I think that I just have to struggle with that because I just don't agree.
No.
Okay, it doesn't it doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't sit right in my body. Because I think people want it to be easy and want it to be nice, and that the work that needs to be done is, I need to have the courage to have a conversation with you. That the work that needs to be done is that, I need to go see a movie with black people in it, or that you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Absolutely.
And so the idea of relationship betrayal without there being an authentic relationship in the first place, it's like restorative justice when there was no justice.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
restore.
Right. And so language is really powerful.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I just think that if we're gonna move forward, that I keep saying it, but it's like it's gonna be hard work, and people are gonna have to step up. Did you say step up?
Step up.
Yeah, step up and step back. Yeah.
So I just,
I can't believe you know Maria.
was it? Yeah, oh,
We
long,
have to talk.
way back.
Yes.
So, in the early 20th century, the industrial workers of the world, the IWW, was the radical anarcho-syndicalist movement of the time. And a lot of their language was around, we are the people who work hard, and we're being ripped off by the parasitic people who are lazy. And that was kind of the class analysis, which enabled a strong movement, and in many cases, multiracial movement. Now, over a period of time, you had the 1930s, you had the war, you had McCarthyism, and that same sensibility gets twisted and reversed, and white workers continue talking about how the lazy parasites are ripping us off, but now the lens has turned and they're talking about black folks, they're talking about migrants and so forth. So that in any moment, the potential to go in one direction or another is always there.
Correct.
I mean, co-optation is built into the whole shebang. And every moment has the potential, any moment that shifts emotional chemistry has the potential for that to be an opening or shutting, right? An opening up. I mean, after George Floyd was murdered, you had all white towns in Utah marching for Black lives, right? And people who felt an earthquake.
Yeah.
What to do after that, they didn't know, but they felt an earthquake. Every organism requires nuanced information about its environment in order to survive. Precision. We need a fair amount of precision to know both where there are dangers and where there are opportunities. We humans tend to think about that on a real pendulum swing, right? That's what trauma does to us. We've been betrayed, so we see everything as betrayal. We feel safe, so we feel that the world is a safe place. And how we find that sweet spot, I think, is really important, even if it's never completely possible. Because on the one hand, we have to look at the possibilities of the moment and say, but we know these things, so we're not going to let our guard down. And we have to be open to the possibilities of the moment to say that real change actually does happen.
Yes.
That if we look back at history, movements do actually at least change the playing ground that make other things possible, and make the other things possible in ways that are more mature and deeper and have learned from the lessons of the past. So those are the two, I think, emotional challenges that I think we all have to navigate in our personal and collective lives, is to both be realistic about the messiness and the potential to default back into oppression, but not shut ourselves off for fear of, to protect our hearts from the possibility that there actually might be something new and generative here.
Yes.
But then it comes to us to make that better offer, so that that's the part that is able to develop.
I want to open this up because this is a wonderful conversation, and I want folks in the audience to be able to ask some questions of our illustrious panelists. So yeah, let's open it up. Let's jump it off. I'm opening it up. Y'all take advantage of it. Yes, I see a hand in the back.
What's up, y'all? Thank you so much for having this conversation. My name is Lane Brown, co-executive director of Candy. And
Thank
that
you for
we've
your work.
observed on the south side has been a ton of, I would say thousands, of first responders activating to help their neighbors, to do this, that, and the other thing. Those same first responders will be quick to call the police on the black folks that live in the same thing that I live in. What can we do as humans who care for our neighbors to challenge this internalized ego celebration that is like trickled down into
Yes,
like
right there, right there.
away from this movement towards each other? What do we do with it? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lane.
Huge thank you, huge thank you. I think, is it okay, y'all, if I say anything? Yeah. You know, I think this is, to some degree, and I really appreciate, Sandra, your pushback. It's making me think a lot about the language I'm using, and there is I know the conversation I'm having with some of the folks who you might very well be the ones you're talking about, is I keep remembering something that Ricardo's sister actually teaches, Aurora teaches. Solidarity is, an enemy is someone with whom you've not yet found solidarity, which blows me away. And so a lot of conversations I've been having, because I keep being asked to go in and to speak with like white folks who are doing exactly the thing that you're saying. I'm not saying I know what the exact answer is, even within this, but is again about, is I keep having conversations about intimacy, assumption of relationship, assumption of safety, assumption of care. Like, what are all the assumptions that are behind there that, as you know, are like baked into saviorism, right? Somebody's sense of who they are and why they even showed up. You know, there was a time when Ricardo, myself, somebody named Arif Mandami, and Liz Loeb, after Michael Brown was murdered, we got asked to sort of organize a bunch of white folks, because there were a lot of white folks who were getting in the way of what Black Visions was trying to create at the time, right? And so much of what we were centering it was like, why the hell are you even involved? Are you involved because you like the picture you see of yourself and that's who you want to be in the world? Are you involved because you're uncomfortable with justice, because you don't want injustice, because you don't want to be somebody who sees injustice happening, but you're still not actually willing to change more deeply, or to take in the way that you are actually participating in this before 4 months ago? You know, and so I feel like I'm responding by saying, that's my people's work. It's deep ass work. It doesn't happen in a quick conversation, and I'm remembering how many times again that we need a 211 call for when something like that happens, that you can call somebody in. That's to me kind of what I'm trying to get at when I'm saying it's about who somebody is in that moment, not what they're doing, because the doing was fucking fantastic. But this is what this exactly leads to, is what you're naming. The doing doesn't go deeply enough, you know, because it's not. It's because it's that distance that's there. I don't feel like I answered that well, other than linking arms with you and saying like, yeah.
I know I've definitely seen that in Phillips. I lived in Phillips 35 years. And I see a lot of that white saviorism. And I don't want to disrespect in any way the efforts that people made in protecting their neighbors. But in many ways it was done in a very anonymous way to respect, you know, not outing somebody for being part, you know, for putting their name or address out on the social media so that we could give rent relief or deliver groceries or pick up their laundry or provide stuff. But I definitely see that when I'm in a all-white room thinking about what are we doing next. And to me, I think we need to break through that anonymous relationships that we've had and really struggle, be willing to struggle and learn, and for, you know, and listen. Because, I mean, to me, that's not really organizing when you all sit in a room and figure it all out for somebody else. That's not organizing. That's kind of replicating a white supremacist system. But in some ways, I also resonate with what, like Ricardo's saying, in the beginning of the 20th century, my people, Finnish people, socialists, communists, worked really hard against capitalism and classism and made some headway. But then there's this whole other piece, you know, of the rise of the KKK in Minnesota. In fact, our, you know, Earl Brown was the founder of the KKK in Minnesota. And so it's complex. It's very complex. And I'm hoping we can learn from each other how to move forward, and learning how to when to step up and step back plays out in community. And yet ends up with some real outcomes. We're not just talking about it.
I think just one comment of where I'm positioned as an artist is trying to, fill the cultural communal space with the stories that we need to counteract that kind of thing.
That's right.
Right? Tell the true story of policing. Like MPD 150, the report, there have been about 5 or 6 reports on the Minneapolis police. That was the only one that did a history.
Yeah.
That's right.
Like when you're dealing with a disease, you've got to look at the history of the patient, and yet all of these reports go straight to the solution.
Yes.
Right? Well, we don't need a diagnosis. All we need is a prescription, and that is another community police relations board or better training or all of
task
that. Right?
force.
More
So
money
anyway, that's
for
just one
police.
example, but
Yes.
that's something that can impact is just tell the freaking truth.
Absolutely.
There you go.
And I would say also, like, what this is speaking to is, oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's thunder outside.
Oh, no, okay. Is we have to expand our imagination. Stories, obviously, our imaginations of how we identify ourselves. Because it seems like we're always being drawn back into a very limited imagination. This is what a liberal thinks in Minnesota, and how a liberal acts in Minnesota or votes, and it is what you were describing, which is like it's a conflict, and it's both confused about what your impetus was for jumping into the fight against authoritarianism and fascism. What your impetus was when you don't want to identify with some of these other sort of far right wing conservative notions, but you will identify with some of these centrist capitalist notions because of a framework that's in your mind that, oh, of course I'm not a communist, or I'm not a socialist, or like those words are scary to folks, even though they might live out a ethos that responds to that. Yes, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say that one of the things that the people that you're asking about, who have been doing some of the mutual aid, that I've been in conversation with, say things like, I just want things to go back to normal.
Normal, yeah.
Yeah.
No, for real, okay? And
Like 1491 normal?
probably, I mean,
Right.
subliminally, but that the raising of your consciousness is also the disruption of your comfort.
Yeah.
And so when you say to me, you want things to go back to being normal,
This is the new normal.
okay, that you want, you want things, okay, you want to make America great again.
Yeah, it's a
It's
different.
the same thing. No, it's the same thing.
It is.
It's the same thing because authoritarianism and fascism didn't just enter folks' lives 4 months ago. Some of us have always been treated like that under this current system. And so when you say you want to go back to things being normal, what I say to people is okay, so what do you mean?
Is that
Because
statement
normal
coming
was not
from a
good for
place
me.
of fear? Because that's usually where it's coming from, a place of fear.
I don't know if it's fear. A lot of times it just seems like people are, they've been doing this for 4 months and they're tired.
Yeah.
And they don't want change.
And I think that people people have not necessarily been, and I don't know how to put it. I think people have not necessarily been told that they need to reach for their higher self.
Yes.
You know, that if you're really going to do this work and you're going to enter in, like you said, now that you're here, I want you to stay, but you know, we got things to tell you, and there are things for you to do. But that really the question of where do you want this to go? Because if you, it feels like
They don't know.
I saw a hand up here, and then I saw a hand here. Sorry.
Mine, normal is a power differential based on white supremacy.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to, some of us don't want to go back there, but we already in it.
Right.
And the white saviorism stuff keeps that power differential going.
Yes.
So it's normal. And if there's discomfort, again, in my mind, with people that look like me, the discomfort is all of a sudden your power shit just got thrown out the window. And how you gonna get retake it? Well, I can retake it by being nice to them colored people over there. And it's a good, compassionate thing, and it seems to me a good Minnesota thing, but it doesn't change the power differential.
Absolutely.
We've got a group that's sponsored by Lane's organization called European Descent, and that's with a SS and an ES. And we sponsor a thing we call Conversations with White People, and there's actually going to be one this Wednesday coming at Park Avenue Methodist Church, South Side. At, what is it, 5:30 to 7:30 or 6 to 8?
I don't know.
Something like that.
I will be there.
You're all invited whenever it is.
So we have time for a few more questions. Okay, sorry, go ahead. Yes, sir.
One more little thing that I feel like I need to bring up, and that is trauma.
Come on now.
We live 7 blocks from George Floyd Square. Our neighborhood was traumatized 5 years ago. Our neighborhood was traumatized every day because black people get brutalized every day in our neighborhood. Minneapolis got brutalized by Metro Surge. And all of that weighs in on trauma to people. And the thing that I haven't
he didn't go back on.
heard much about is how are we going to heal from that? How are we going to overcome the effects of that kind of stuff? Because it's happening all the time. And there's been powerful jolts of it, but it's a background. It's going on all the time.
Can you speak a little bit about healing
Well,
from trauma?
we're really short on time. Maybe we
Yes.
could get what other questions and
Okay.
possibly just talk about all of them.
Okay. I know I saw another question here and then one more here.
I was wondering how you are doing.
Well, let's take the last question and we'll try to answer all of these.
Sure. My question, one of the things that I've been doing through Metro Surge is really, I had a hospital appointment, so I wasn't able to do as much help as I wanted. I was watching a lot of the people I know do so much powerful shit, and people I love and my neighbors get hurt. Now that I'm out, a lot of what I'm feeling is urgency, and I've been really trying to sit with it and trying to interrogate where that motivation to just do something comes from. And I'm really fucking grateful for this conversation because it's really opening up my eyes like, oh shit, is this coming just from a desire to be helpful, a desire to be important? Is this coming from, how do you learn to sit with the desire to do something and interrogate your motivation to prevent yourself from propagating further harm?
Tristan to the front desk. Tristan to the front desk.
You're not in this room.
Because I feel like a lot of harm has been done by people in a body like mine, white people just wanting to do something. And I don't want to continue that. Like, my ancestral sorrow has already done enough. So how do you learn to sit with that, interrogate yourself, and help other people sit and interrogate their motivations?
Without being paralyzed.
Well, one thing that you might find disturbing or you might find comforting is that you don't get to do it right,
Exactly,
but you still get to do it,
exactly.
right? You know, there's a lot of sort of delicacy, you know, I don't want to offer this person this oxygen mask that I have when they're gasping for air because I might do it in a way that's problematic. Right? Oh, yeah, that loaded word, right? Problematic. We are problematic, right? And sometimes you just have to provide solidarity, and you're never going to get it right. And the people you're providing it to are not necessarily in a mood to give you a gold star for it.
That's right, exactly.
Right.
That's right.
But the thing is that, so that means that rejection is part of solidarity because people are so used to being betrayed. So I don't have any answers for you, except just keep trying. You know, it's a good question to ask, but don't get paralyzed by it.
I appreciate
Right?
it. Thank you.
And, I mean, trauma is too big a topic, I think, to do a deep dive into, except to say that, well, somewhere along the course of my life, somebody did me the favor of inventing the internet. I don't think it was Al Gore. But I had moved to the States in '67, so Malcolm X had already been killed. But later I was able to go back and hear his speeches and realize, wait a minute, what he's doing, at least in part in these speeches, is he's reframing a narrative to traumatize people. Reframing the narrative against all the things that white supremacy told people and saying, no, you're beautiful, you're powerful, you can defend yourselves, etc.
Yeah.
Which is one of the stages of healing trauma.
Yep.
And that was a revelation to me because that made me realize that's what I'm doing with my art. Reframing narratives in ways that reflect back at people that they have agency. Not just telling the stories that bad shit happened. That's not healing trauma, that's rehearsing it.
Exactly.
Right, but, so there are all of these, steps that we just look at the process of individual trauma healing actually does in many ways translate to collective healing. The witnessing, the truth-telling, the agency, because action is the greatest protection against and healing, and just figure out ways to do that are guided. Because just acting out to restore your sense of power can be very toxic. I mean, that's what abuse is about. So, but I mean, it's a good question, but it just takes just reflection, illumination,
Witness.
and practice. And how am I doing? I'm doing okay. I mean, just
Yeah.
what keeps me grounded is that from an early age, living in the forest, I have been anchored in the sense that things come in cycles, waves, etc., so that I don't get shocked. I get surprised but not shocked. When fascism, bursts on the scene, my worldview isn't shattered. It's like, oh, what does this mean about the long and the short stages of the cycles that we're in, and what are the tasks for the moment? So fascism really sucks, but it's hard, but it also is possible, and I feel grounded in that I'm doing what I should be doing.
I'm doing, it's hard to put into words because it's different levels.
Thank you.
So I'm doing all right. Spring is finally coming. I'm doing all right My mother turned 95 last week, and I still have her. And so I'm on a different kind of journey with her now. She's still the mother, but I'm on a different. I mean, and it requires me to be present, and I require myself to be present in a way that feels sacred. And so, how I choose to locate myself in movement work is different than it would have been 5 years ago. But my mother is also an old warrior, so it's also still learning, still receiving. And then there's the rageful part.
It has never changed.
Yeah. Yeah. Nope, it hasn't. And so I try to maintain equilibrium and pay attention to my internal self and respond. How you doing?
It's a weird thing, and I think with getting older, sometimes okayness feels more accessible to me than it used to. This weird sort of thing, because I'm also not. I mean, yesterday I spent time with a young person who's tried to take their own life as a result of what's happening. I'm giving care to a number of people who still can't leave their homes. And so, we're not okay. Deeply, sometimes I'm not okay, and then I'm also okay. The second piece about what do we do, I'm like, it's this, how the awkwardness and the glory of people coming together and not performing in front of each other. I do trust that, it has meaning. It doesn't have periods at the ends of sentences, but I trust the awkwardness, the rub, as well as the moment where there's the aha in the room. And mostly what I've done these last 3 months is do a lot of work with people one-on-one or in small groups who are trying to figure out how to tolerate the intolerable. And what's been so interesting to me is from people who are probably absolutely the savior, some of them I wouldn't be surprised if right now are saying, can we get back to normal? Some folks here, to folks who just lost a family member who was kidnapped, all sorts of experiences. And to a person in that moment of right now we're witnessing what's going on here. Just right now, what is it that's going to support you to be able to sustain a little bit longer? That's what that work is to tolerate the intolerable a little bit longer, which lots of people in this room have practiced in lots of different ways. But in this context, is to a person, almost everybody at one point would have a hard time remembering that this was impacting them. Even if they had a family member who had just been kidnapped and they were trying to figure out how to make sure their children were okay. Still, there'd be this moment where the most important thing I could say is, can we just pause? This is happening to you right now.
Yes.
Right now.
The specific complexity, no right way of being who you are, you right now. No matter who you are. And then, of course, depending on who the person is, then there's that doesn't mean you center yourself. For other folks, that's not something I have to say, but it's but still, it's happening to you. And I feel like in movement spaces often, and I don't want to say this is true for everybody, but we are shaped to sort of notice the collective, which is glorious. Huge, because this is collective. This is hugely collective. And so it's not an either or ever. But as a practitioner, the number of times where it's no, actually, you right now. The fact that you asked the question of how are we doing to the people in the room is fascinating to me. But it's across bodies, across experiences, that ended up being the most powerful moment. Again and again and again, was right now, just come into your own life for whatever it is. For whoever is there, the reality of it, and let it be witnessed. And that is sure as hell not enough to make a revolution happen, ever. But revolution is so much harder without it. And so that, when you say we are a trauma's there, I'm trauma on top of generational trauma for some of us, trauma on top of this sort of piece. It's it's a word that I both adore and to some degree I'm starting to hate a little bit with, is because it's like, what the hell does that even mean? This country is the definition of trauma.
Yeah.
Like that's how it exists. And so how, the healing, I always think of Bernice Johnson Reagan, right? With this piece that she wrote in '83 about coalition building. And there's this piece that has just shaped my organizing where she was like, coming into coalition, into rooms like this, is not coming into a womb. This is not the place where you come to be comfortable. This is something, but you want to have a place to go back to, please, Lord, may you have a place to go back to where somebody is going to look at you, know who you are, you don't feel like you have to explain yourself. But that's not what this this is. And that room, that what you lifted around comfort. And so to me, the last piece I'll say is that this is about you right now as well. Like that is right in the middle of being able to discern what's happening in the room right now. Who am I in this room right now? How am I seeing folks in this room right now? So, and then
Okay, you were talking about me just now. No, really, just a quick addendum, and I'd love to hear how you answer the question too.
Yes.
But when I was a teenager, I moved out of home at 15. I dropped out of high school. I was hitting adolescence. I was experiencing immigration. The shit was hitting the fan, and I do have a narrative of myself about how together I had my shit, right? That I was able to navigate that and engage in activism and engage in all of these things and just be so mature for my age, right? And it's true, and I actually am proud of the aspects of that were true, but it's only when I have the quiet space and conversation with some of my peers from that time that I think about, not having enough food, scraping together, dealing with all these things, dealing with the police, etc., are things that I carry that haven't been part of that narrative, the way in which it was hard. And, I realized in listening to both of you that my initial answer was performing the okayness of it, which is actually something that I am proud of how I've become a person who can navigate these things in the way I do.
Yes.
But it also means that there's an iceberg under the tip that also needs to be recognized, that doesn't negate the power and the agency.
Absolutely.
But
It's beautiful.
it's a more multidimensional way of thinking about it.
Well, thank you all. I know our time went by very fast, but this was a blessing, and I'm doing better than I was earlier because of this experience. And I'm not just saying that just because that's a good thing to say, but it's really, Ricardo peeped me earlier because I'm a filmmaker, so I'm an introvert, so I hide out behind the camera in order to get this kind of social connection. So this is actually very nourishing for me. So I'm nourished. I feel very filled and fulfilled today because of this experience. So I thank you all. I thank you all too for coming. Coming to the north side. Thank you all.